Great to have you along with us this day. The primary in the Democratic U.S. Senate race is heating up. New polling data. So sit in with us as we get the inside out. Off the Record.
Production of Off the Record is made possible in part by Bellwether Public Relations, a full-service strategic communications agency partnering with clients through public relations, digital marketing, and issue advocacy. Learn more at bellwetherpr.com. And now, this edition of Off the Record with Tim Skubic.
Welcome to Studio C, Off the Record. The end is in sight, right?
Close.
Not soon enough. Polls. The U.S. Senate race. Simon, we have three polls that are out. The Emerson poll, 15-point lead for Dr. El Sayed. The Tavern poll, 10 points. Stevie Mitchell at 14. What's going on?
People are reading into this what they like. You know, these Tavern research polls are really good, obviously, for Abdul Sayed. But, you know, when you look at the Mitchell polls, it shows that Haley Stevens in the general election is far outperforming her primary rival here. And that Abdul Sayed, I believe, is losing by 10 points against Mike Rogers in the general election. And that is something that I think Democrats are a little bit skittish about.
Well, and the devil's in the details with some of these polls. I mean, with the Tavern poll, for instance, the predominance of, or I shouldn't say the predominance, but a huge bulk of people polled were white, college-educated women, which we already kind of had an understanding were individuals who would be going for El Sayed anyways. I'm more interested in these. It really seems like the X factor here is like the low propensity voters, who's going to turn out, what is going to actually get people to the polls here, and how much is that, you know, El Sayed is really relying on a base of voters beyond the, you know, white, college-educated, but younger folks. Are those people going to get to the polls? Who knows if this is yet another instance of we have all this polling, we have all this momentum, and people think something's in the bag, and then election night happens.
Very astute. Could 18 to 29-year-olds can find something else to do besides vote, can't they?
There's a lot of things out there, but this is also an election where we're seeing, you know, a ton of young people do turn out and support El Sayed, at least when we're seeing, you know, his on-the-ground campaigning. Again, remains to be seen if we're actually going to see those people get to those polls on election night.
We should say Michigan's made it easier to vote, though, too. I mean, same-day registration now, right? And we saw that lines at the University of Michigan campus a couple years ago. So, I mean, it could be an interesting Tuesday, depending on what the youth vote decides to do.
Yeah, but it's August 4th. It's not November.
Yeah.
No, there's nobody on this campus right now. I just checked outside. And so they're not going to be lining up like they were in the November general election 2 years ago. And they will this November. But you cannot win.
Depending on who the candidate is.
Yeah, well, you can't win a statewide primary on Ingham and Washtenaw and Kalamazoo counties. And you certainly can't win a general election that way. So is Abdul's energy getting into the suburbs? Is it cutting into her natural lead with older black voters? That is going to be the key, to watch in Metro Detroit. And also, does he win Kent County? If he can win Kent County, you can typically kind of squeak one out and win in other areas. But counting her in Oakland County, trying to sort of, not have a blowout in Macomb or downriver, other types of battleground areas of this state, where there also are some battleground primaries going on. That's going to be really the real test here.
I think this is like, to zoom out a little bit, I think this is why the polling is a little bit dicey right now, is that Abdul's gambit is that the kind of voters that he's pursuing aren't going to be captured in polls. Pollsters, when they're making these polls, they're trying to create a projection and estimate of what the electorate is going to look like on election day. And sort of his gambit is going after these voters who don't normally turn out. They're not going to be captured in that sample of likely voters. So if he can, much like Trump did in 2024, capture those low propensity voters, bring them to the polls, then they're not going to be captured in these polling samples, and so he's going to be doing better than expected and outperform.
But 15 points better. I mean, that's something. If we saw a 15-point spread Tuesday night, I mean, that would just be shocking.
It would be Brexit, essentially, for the Democratic Party.
For sure. Well, especially with $60 million in outside spending against him at this point.
Right. Of all the numbers floating around this week, here were the three numbers that caught my attention.
Okay.
Regular Democrats, 41% declare themselves regular Democrats. Mm-hmm. Progressive Democrats, 32%. Mm-hmm. Progressive Socialists, 18%. Do the math, boys and girls. 50% of the Democratic Party in Michigan ain't what we call regular Ds. Is that not significant or not?
I think it's incredibly significant, particularly in terms of what comes after the primary. The fact that you see the splintering of the electorate here, especially among Democrats, means that whoever wins this primary is going to have and hope for that kumbaya moment, that they can sort of repair this schism that the party's undergoing right now and bring them together. This is still purple state. Mike Rogers is a very effective candidate, and they're really going to need all these factions to come back together around their nominee if they want him to have a chance in November.
I don't know how you do that, and I don't know who the grown-ups at the table are who helped to make that happen. This week, Hillary Skolton came out and basically said that she's not sure that she would back Abdul al-Sayed in the general after this.
This is a congresswoman from Kent County, a most crucial person to try to get, a Democrat who was sitting in Gerald Ford's seat. And I mean, just getting that person on board with you is going to be, huge.
This primary has been vitriolic, and it has gotten more so over the final few days. And so, who plays that sort of person who gets everyone back together? I don't know.
Right.
I don't know.
The fact that Governor Gretchen Whitmer has come in and thrown her hat in for Haley Stevens as well.
Like all the sort of Gary Peters. I mean, anyone that you could see who's come in and said, let's kind of like cool things down. Let's get on the same page. Who plays that role?
Right. Well, wait a second. If you want to cool things down, do you take up sides? Because they're just antagonistic to the other side. You said, what's the governor doing, chicken? And she said she wasn't going to do this.
Take sides in a primary, though. Like, this is, I guess, where a little bit of my confusion comes from, is people being like, well, why, why are people supporting this or that? Like, you're going to always have this vitriolic kind of primary. The real question is, like, Zoe was talking about, how is, for instance, if al-Sayed does win on Tuesday, he's thrown a lot of flack towards, the establishment, quote unquote, Democrats, and we're going to need to see him be able to thread that needle and bring those people back on board. Now, Haley Stevens is running ads right now that is accusing him of calling Whitmer something like, or it was Michelle Obama uninspired and Whitmer bought and paid for. I know that those ads are making inroads into voters. I've heard it from people who I know that live down in Oakland County. Is he going to be able to come back from this level of advertising that we've seen against him, and the fact that he's being painted as not necessarily being able to unite a coalition of Democrats?
Yeah, the problem with the Democratic Party leadership right now is they are not looking at the issues that are inflaming people. They are not in tune with it. Abdul has tapped into this. He has spent so many weeks talking about AIPAC is buying this election for Haley Stevens. And then on Monday, Haley Stevens tries to come out in that debate and say, I'm going to rail against DTE Energy. And he said, yeah, but you took $40,000 of their money. And she sits there and denies it, which was a lie. It's been fact checked. She's taken money for years from DTE. Yeah. She even transferred.
She took the money, she put it into her congressional account, then transferred it into her.
A month later, I mean, she didn't have to transfer that money. She could have left it in the house.
She thought she needed to.
She could have, it was a $2,500 check. She could have given it back if she thought it was going to be a vulnerability. But DTE is so hated right now among the electorate over the affordability of power rates, over their reliability after every time the wind blows in the state, and after doing these big deals with data companies, data center developers and big tech. And so Democrats are looking, they're seeing the images of Gretchen Whitmer, smiling with Sam Altman and hitching the horse of Democrats to these data centers. You see this up and down the ballot. Abe Ayash, former state rep running for state senate, he's kind of thrown this term DTE Democrats around. And I mean, this is part of the Civil War. It's really hitting people hard right now. And Abdul is tapping into that. The establishment has no response to this, other than what we saw with Haley just kind of flailing on the stage the other night.
And I think that this moment is really remarkable, this moment in politics, because of the centrality of the influence of money in politics and campaign finance. This issue has not broken through in previous elections, at least in my relatively short career covering politics. I've never seen it have this much prominence. And so when you move into the general election, I think this is where Democratic operatives are having some hand-wringing, because these are going to be $200+ million U.S. Senate race. And so as a result, they are going to be relying on that outside money. There is a whole cavalcade of outside money, super PACs, dark money groups. They're going to pour in for these Senate candidates. And Democrats say, if we swear this off, I don't know if we have enough gas in the tank to make it through November.
And you mentioned getting money out of politics. We'd be remiss to not mention that there is going to be a ballot initiative this year on the November ballot to stop utilities from donating to political causes and regulate, I think it's something like state contractors making over $250,000. Now, that is it's something that is actually supported by both Democrats and Republicans. We saw Matt Hall, the House Speaker, put his weight behind that. We've seen Perry Johnson come out in favor of that. We've obviously seen Abdul El-Sayed talking about getting money out of politics in his campaign. You know, I think back to when we had abortion on the ballot and what a driving factor that was for getting Democrats to the polls. I'm curious how much of an X factor this is going to have for people, because it's something that is so universally accepted on both sides. I
don't think it approaches the abortion fever pitch, but you'd rather have it, you know.
It's motivating, and I think it overall shows what we're talking about is that voters are fed up and frustrated with certain institutions, right? And this is also what Abdul has been able to key into, is that corporations and institutions that are supposed to work for you just simply aren't anymore.
So whose job is it to put Humpty Dumpty back together again?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anybody, at least in the Democratic Party leadership, is prepared to do that.
Why not? Well, who?
I mean,
some county commissioner up north, with all due respect to up north?
No, I think
I would say there's only two people.
Two.
Yes, and it's the nominee, the Democratic nominee for U.S. Senate, and the person who loses to them. And if you don't have those two together, you know, holding hands.
But somebody has to go to the two of them and say, here's what you have to do.
So they've said in theory that they would go back to support one another should they lose the nomination. But it's all about whether or not that actually happens, to Simon's point.
And whether their supporters actually decide to do that. Because it's one thing to see it happen. It's another. I mean, you read some of these vitriolic posts about where people are at, about the candidates, and it's really hard to see some people suddenly just going, oh, okay, now voting blue.
Yeah, no. I mean, even the other night we had the Haley Stevens come out on Twitter basically trying to turn the race into, she had a post that basically accused El-Sayed of, oh, so you like hate Jewish people, basically is what it boiled down to. And it's like blaming Jews. And it was like, okay, now we're really just getting down to like the lowest of the low of these kinds of attacks. And, you know, I'm just happy it's going to be Tuesday in like 4 days.
That's the fear. I mean, the Jewish Democrats in Oakland County essentially pulled their money on August 5th. And Abdul is basically on his own, relying on the Bernie Sanders revolutionaries essentially to get to the gate.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big boon for Michigan Democrats statewide over the past 2 decades is that they've had sometimes competitive but relatively cordial primaries where everyone was able to come together afterwards. This is now a street fight.
So if you're Mike Rogers and watching all this, what are you thinking?
Back eating popcorn.
Is he? With butter or without?
Look at what he's been able, the glide path he's had over the past few months. I mean, this is setting up beautifully for him to be able to sort of, I mean, I think the biggest thing for him to now figure out is the relationship with Trump moving forward, right? We had polling numbers come out this week that show the president's approval ratings are now at the lowest levels that they have been. What does that relationship with Trump look like, and what does campaigning look like? You know, John James has sort of figured out what his relationship with Trump is going to look like. I think for Mike Rogers, it's going to be a little bit different.
So does he do the pivot?
I think he's got to do a pivot to the general. Absolutely. Absolutely. And figuring out how to keep the base excited, enthused. I mean, we all saw what happened in 24, right, where people just simply did not vote for Mike Rogers, who voted for this president.
And so the Democratic commercial will be, ladies and gentlemen, Mike Rogers speaks out of both sides of his mouth. Is that the kind of guy you want speaking in the U.S. Senate? One day he's for Donald Trump. The next day, all of a sudden, when it's politically not advantageous, he's switched horses. Right. Speaking of horses, Chad, huh?
Well, the other thing is they're not. The Democrats still have the receipts, and the receipts are your gas bill and your grocery bill. I mean, there were Republicans in this state, State Representative Matt Maddock, May 1st, putting out a tweet predicting, hey, in 3 months, Trump will have gas down to $1.99. Well, guess what? It's $4.30 now a gallon this weekend. On 3 months later, this is going to haunt Republicans from Mike Rogers down to county commissioners. They are not going to.
Not to mention the bombs going off.
They're not going to be able to hide from this. Not to mention that the war is still going on in Iran with Iran. There's no end in sight. that there's essentially a quagmire in the Strait of Hormuz, and people's price of living every day is still much higher than it even was when Joe Biden was dealing with record inflation.
Let's just remember, as we go into the weekend before the election, that Jim Blanchard was going to beat John Engler. Remember that story? And what happened, boys and girls? John Engler beat Jim Blanchard. So I'm not saying, okay, just be careful.
Look, anything can happen, and we will. There's still a lot of folks who are going to turn out on Tuesday.
And again, we don't know how Tuesday turns out, but we also have, if Abdul al-Sayed is the nominee, we have not seen how ugly this could get about his religion and his skin color, and the undertone of that kind of a race in the fall is yet to come, but it will come.
I mean, we're already kind of starting to see that, though, in statements out of the state Republican Party who insist on calling him by his full legal name, Abdul Rahman, as if like that's something to be scared of. I mean, actually, they issued a statement not too long ago that said Abdul Rahman, whatever his middle name is, I can't remember now, El Sayed, like terrorist sympathizer. We're getting back to like 9/11 levels of, we should maybe even expect to see that level of Islamophobia scare tactic. Because really, I mean, we saw it in the New York City mayoral election, and nobody stops comparing this U.S. Senate election to that. Why should we be surprised if that's also going to infiltrate here as well?
Well, this U.S. Senate race has trumped something that's been traditional in our state, which is the major focus in the primary has always been the governor's race, because that's the one that's closest to all of us. So what's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, I think
right, there's a governor's race in all of this.
That too.
Still Republican.
I mean, on the Democratic side, Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson is essentially the nominee apparent at this point. She's dozens of points ahead of Chris Swanson in all polling that we've seen. But I think the Republican race is a little bit more interesting. Perry Johnson spent $30 million of his own money, and that's put him within, at least according to Emerson polling, 8 points of John James, which is technically within the margin of error.
Wait a minute. If the margin of error in that poll was 3.7, I flunked math.
It's 3.7 for the Senate race, 5.2, I believe, for the governor's.
Okay, 5.2. Yeah. All right, 5.2. Simon is not 8.
Yeah. Well, it's 5.2 in either direction, so both numbers can go in either direction, 5.2 points. And so it creates a little bit of overlap. It's slim, and it means that John James has a pretty high probability of winning this thing. But Perry Johnson, he feels confident. I was at the Trump tailgate that he hosted on Monday, which Trump's campaign called him a never-Trumper on the news that he was hosting this, and he invited John James on stage to sort of coronate him as his endorsed candidate. And he's really confident. He's going to these events, and they're able to pack small diners. And so for him, this seems like a good signal that he's got some momentum. So
confident that he sent out a questionnaire auditioning lieutenant governor candidates. That's a first.
And saying that he's already bought time for post-primary advertisements.
But he's already got his motel or hotel for election night, too.
How many TV ads have you seen from John James's campaign?
How many fingers do you have?
It's close to zero. I mean,
the super PAC supporting him, though, has spent several million dollars.
The super PAC has a little bit, but John James, they're not. It's not heavy. I mean, in like right now, compared to Perry, they're not going ad to ad. I mean, they are not sweating over there, and they're pretty confident that Perry Johnson's going to flame out here. And he will have spent Dick DeVos level money to lose a primary.
But it'll be curious to see if that, don't have to spend, I'm good to go attitude continues. We've seen that before from John James, who has, ditched speaking to the media, wouldn't do certain circuits, lost then statewide twice already. So, it'll be interesting to see whether or not he changes up his general election game, or if he thinks he has it so far in the bag with going up against a potential Secretary Benson matchup that he continues with his status quo.
I think Jordan brings up an important point, which is, his campaign has been relatively guarded up to this point. They're not highly visible, and they're not.
Well,
right? But at the same time, he feels free to go up on stage and then say that Donald Trump won the 2020 election in Michigan as he's staring down a potential general election matchup against the state's chief elections officer. So he's really sort of almost goading her to say, let's enter your wheelhouse and sort of talk on these issues that are sort of what you've banked your entire candidacy on, more or less.
And he didn't just say Trump won. He said Trump won Michigan 3 times, which is effectively almost a great ad for Secretary Benson if she goes to run, saying that this man, John James has gone on the record saying that Joe Biden did win Michigan.
He's gone back and forth.
Yeah,
He's gone back and
he's a
forth.
flip-flopper.
And yeah, you want to talk about speaking out of both sides of your mouth. You know, that's something that, again, we go back to the Trump effect and how close do you have to be to court those more like MAGA Republicans. Okay, but how much is the rest of the state repulsed by that embracement? And so do you actually have the numbers to carry you over the finish line? John James is betting that if he goes all in on Trump, he's going to be able to, or at least it's what it looks like at this period. If he goes all in on Trump, he will win Michigan. That remains to be seen because that has not worked for him in the past.
Do you find it interesting that the R's have left basically Ms. Benson run whatever she wanted to do this summer with no comments about her at all?
They have hardly put a glove on her. I mean, and it's in part.
Is that a missed opportunity?
I mean, probably, but they're still beating each other up. They're having their big little Donnybrook right now, and so.
Well, can't they walk and chew gum at the same time?
Well, they also are mindful again that they have major weaknesses with the price of gas and food and everything else, and so they don't want to trip over that wire quite yet, and so they're waiting to get this all worked out.
Yeah, and I mean, also, it's important to note that voters have limited attention spans. There's only so much political information you're going to get in a day, and right now, the fire hose is the Democratic U.S. Senate primary. And so why even talk about the governor's race when all you get to do instead is watch 2 Democratic candidates slug it out?
And at this point, it feels more than a fire hose. It's a waterfall, for goodness sake. Like, it's just everywhere you look. I mean, the other day, I turned on my TV just to put on the news, and I think I saw 6 or 7 Haley and El Sayed ads, like back to back to back to back to back. Some of them the same ones twice in a row.
Yeah.
That's all people are getting right now.
Let alone just how nationalized that race has become. I mean, really, you look at it in political operatives, campaign managers, the national media is really looking at this U.S. Senate race as sort of dictating what the future of the Democratic Party is going to look like in the United States.
As well.
Yeah.
Because we have for the Senate, the 7th Congressional District with William Lawrence, and then even in the 13th with Donovan McKinney attempting to unseat Sri Thanadar.
Yeah.
This is a test case for whether populist progressivism in a midterm election with a deeply unpopular president in the White House can actually take hold and have some staying power. We haven't seen that before in American politics.
So, did the Trump
in this era?
I'm sorry. Did the Trump visit move the needle?
No.
I wouldn't say so.
No, I mean,
When he said basically stay tuned, things are going to get better.
which is what he
He's been
says.
saying and we were going to be out of this war in weeks, and we were going to have lower gas prices, and we were going to see. I think at one point he said that he's treated us better than our own parents. If that's the case, I need better parents. I would say,
He's got a massive laundry list of policy priorities right now, Trump, and I think the fact that he visited in general is, I think, a really optimistic sign for Democrats, because these rallies, they're not going after persuadable voters, the independents that really matter in Michigan elections. He's shoring up the base.
They are concerned about the base.
Yes.
That if you talk to Matt Hall, I'm sure he's got internal numbers, my guess is, that says it's soft, it's swooshy. It's now, in fact, he has said we need to get that base out in order to keep control of the House.
This thing that Will Lawrence talked about the other day, the progressive congressional candidate in this 3-way Democratic primary in the mid-Michigan, where they're going out and targeting low propensity Trump voters, people who've only voted in presidential elections, the last 3, trying to talk to them about an issue that gets them fired up, and that is data centers.
And Abdullah is doing the same thing.
And,
just put on there
and so this is something that I think even Republicans have not even thought about, that there might be some of folks from their tribe that could be convinced to come over and vote for the anti-data center candidate, not the Democrat, the anti-data center candidate. This is where the Democrats are going to try to message. And that's why they're railing against DTE. That's why, like I said earlier, Abdul spent all of his time talking about AIPAC, and then he finally kind of stepped on the issue at the debate on Monday with DTE. Pick your local boogeyman. He already has all the voters that are anti-AIPAC, but there are a lot of untapped voters, and they're low propensity. They're in the exurbs. They're in places around like Howell Township where there was going to be a data center. There's a bunch of Trump voters out there that don't vote normally in midterms, but they could be persuaded to come out and vote for a candidate who's telling them they're going to get rid of the data centers or put a moratorium down.
This is, I think, the glimmer of daylight that these progressive candidates have and what they're shooting for. I think you hit the nail on the head. And that's that so much of Trump's magic in Michigan, the way he was able to win the state twice, is because he was able to sell voters, especially low propensity voters, who aren't particularly ideological, they're not particularly politically engaged, but they are very anti-establishment, and they're angry at the system that they feel isn't representing them. And so I don't think, because they're not that ideological, these voters, there might be some persuadability there, that they'd be willing to come out and say, hey, I'll go for this candidate regardless of party, because they're anti-establishment enough. They're willing to go against the system. They voted for the Republican in Donald Trump. He's been in office for 6 years now, and they haven't necessarily seen the kind of establishment shattering change that he's promised. And
establishment Dems don't buy it, though, right?
No.
What their argument is that's not what's going to happen.
Well, we'll see how long you can stick your fingers in your ears and just keep walking on by, I guess.
Yeah.
And we'll find that out on Tuesday.
Quickly, the bridge is open.
Gordie Howe Bridge is now open.
He shoots, he scores.
It's 8 years of construction, 14 years after Governor Rick Snyder signed this deal to bypass the legislature, an unprecedented act by a governor in a couple of decades of work that stretches back really to, it started under Engler, but it has involved Blanchard when he was the ambassador to Canada. This has been, the Canadians have been pursuing a new bridge essentially since the Maroon family bought the Ambassador Bridge and bought out Warren Buffett in 1978. It's been an epic battle along the river, and it finally happened even after some meddling by Donald Trump at the end.
So, have you guys been across it yet?
No, I've only watched Gretchen Whitmer and Gary Peters take their joyrides over it.
I went to the base of it on Friday, but I have not actually driven over it yet.
All right.
I'm waiting to ride my bike.
I know, it's going to be fun. You can go to walk and ride your bike on August 5th, the day after the primary. It's a good way to shake off the election energy.
Just don't jump off.
No promises.
Thank you, all of you, for this great program. Thank you for tuning in. Go and vote if you haven't already. And next Friday, we'll tell you what you did and what you didn't do. See you then.
Production of Off the Record is made possible in part by Bellwether Public Relations, a full-service strategic communications agency partnering with clients through public relations, digital marketing, and issue advocacy. Learn more at bellwetherpr.com. For more Off the Record, visit WKAR.org. Michigan public television stations have contributed to the production costs of Off the Record.